Hey guys, Traylor here, and I want to do a quick video on the importance of journaling and give you some things to think about as to maybe making journaling a part of your recovery journey and your recovery process. For some of you, maybe you've been like me and you've been journaling for quite some time. It's a habit you got into maybe a long time ago. You're used to the process of kind of working through thoughts, emotions, ideas by just kind of putting pen to paper and just working through that. For some of you, maybe you've never journaled, and if you're really honest, you've maybe looked at it kind of like a girl keeping a diary and something that you want to steer clear of. But I just encourage you to at least consider making journaling a part of your recovery process. And here's the main reason why. If we read the Old Testament, especially in the book of Genesis, you've got story after story after story chronicled there for us. And it just kind of lays out the history of God's people, key stories about Joseph and Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and all these folks that we've come to adore and we've learned so much from. The thing about their stories is that we have the privilege and the perspective of flipping ahead a few chapters and knowing how the story is going to turn out. But often we forget what it might have been like for those individuals in the moment. What was going on? Take Abraham, for instance. We know how it all turned out with Abraham when he was told to sacrifice his son. But what about the emotion when he's actually walking up the hill, when he's actually got his son there, who's teeming with excitement as any young boy would be, and he's on this adventure with his dad, and he's asking questions, and he's excited, and all these things. And imagine the emotion that's going through Abraham, though. Or what about Joseph in the Old Testament, when his brothers, they hate him because of the dreams he's had, and they know that their father favors him and looks at him and gives him things that maybe they don't get, and they're jealous and they're very envious, and so they come up with this plan to kill him. They wind up listening to the older brother, don't kill him, but they put him in this pit, and they ultimately sell him into slavery. Now, Joseph is one that you can begin to really see a story unfolding, and it's a roller coaster ride emotionally as far as the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, till ultimately he's forgotten for 14 years in prison. But we know now, because of our perspective and because what is laid out for us, that God's plan through all of that was to have him as second in command over all of Egypt. Well, he didn't know that when he was imprisoned and when he was in the pit looking up at his brothers that he thought were going to kill him. Now, why do I tell you that? Because what journaling does is gives you kind of the same perspective. This stack here, this is some of my journals that I just pulled for this video. I've got them up in my library, and these journals go from my current journal that I'm currently recording my thoughts in, all the way back to, I believe, the earliest one in this stack is 1997. Now, these journals, there's a wealth of information. There's so many prayers in these. There's so many things that I was wrestling through, wondering what God was doing. There's a lot of our own reconciliation story in these journals, some of the confusion. I was just flipping back through some of them, some of my emotions when I was going to court. Melody was taking me back to court for various reasons, and child support things, and all the emotions that came out of that. And now, thankfully, because I took the time to journal all the raw emotion through all of that, it now helps me right now sitting here in 2013 making this video. If I ever forget, how real it really was, and that's our tendency to forget. The further back something goes, we really do have that tendency. I can go back and I can be right in the moment. I can remember the real emotions, and I can now be so in awe of what God did through our story, through my story, the way He answered my prayers. Because we pray often, but if we're not careful, sometimes even weeks go by and we forget what was such an urgent matter even a couple of weeks ago. God's answered that prayer, things have worked out, and we're on to the next thing. And sometimes we're so in the moment, which is a good thing to live in the moment, but it also is good to remember. Scripture is full of God's people building a monument in order to remember what God had done. So I encourage you if you're just starting the recovery journey, which I know many of you are, to consider, go ahead and just getting, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. This is the current journal that I'm using right now. It's just a simple leather journal. And I know at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million we have here in Alabama, there's any number of bookstores. You're going to be able to find a section with journals. And they range from leather bound to, like some of these are paper bound. Here's another leather bound one. You know, all different price points. You can probably get a good one for $9. One thing I wish that I had done is gotten the same type of journal. That's the only thing I regret. So now I could very neatly begin to put them on the shelf. But it does kind of look neat that they all have a different spine and different look, and kind of helps me know what time frame that journal is recording as far as the years and the events and those kind of things. So as far as what that looks like though in your recovery, early on, I would encourage you to make it a habit as a daily habit to write down your thoughts. One of the things as guys that we're going to be learning more and more to do in the recovery process is really getting in tune with what we're feeling emotionally. For men, for the most part, that's not a real strength of ours to really put into words what we're feeling. And sometimes it takes getting pen to paper and just begin to just stream of conscious, no filter, and just writing down what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And the more we do that, the more our perspective often can change. It reminds me of David in the Psalms when he's really complaining in the first part, I think it's Psalm 51 maybe, where he's complaining and the wealthy people that are heathens and they don't care anything about God, but they're being blessed, and he's kind of having a pity party. But the more he begins to express himself and just share his real feelings, the more his perspective begins to change. And at the end of that chapter, he's worshiping. So a complete 180 in his mindset. I believe journaling allows us to do that as we're dealing with emotions, rather than keeping those stuffed, bottled up, and not dealt with. Journaling is a great tool to be able to begin just to process, just to let our thinking flow without having to be filtered. Now, for many of us that have lived a double life for so long, that filtering mechanism is just a part of us. You know, we'll have a thought and it'll be really kept captive for a while before we really let it out, because we're so afraid of letting out something that we're not ready to let out, or to let a secret out that we don't want to be let out. So just sometimes this stream of conscious writing. Now, I will say, back in my early days of journaling, I would filter a lot. I even can go back to some of my early journals before my secret addiction came out. And as I was praying about the issue of sexual sin and sexual addiction, I would use a code word or words for that, because I was afraid if something happened to me or somebody found my journal and they were reading it, I was afraid of being outed by somebody reading my journal. So I encourage you to be honest and transparent in your journal. This is yours. This is your time to process what you're dealing with in therapy, or what you're going through in your small group, maybe what's going on at church. I would encourage you, when you go to church, have your journal there with you, because as you're worshiping and as you're listening to the pastor, God may be bringing some things to mind, maybe helping you connect the dots at a deeper level with some of the things that are going on right now in your life. But the great value with your journal, don't throw them away. Put them on the shelf, and at times go back and just read. Go back and reflect on the broad brush movement of God's hand that He's been doing in your life. Because sometimes we're so focused on the right now and the details of today that we forget some of those things that God has done. And just sometimes picking up your journal, flipping back through it, always date your entries so you kind of know the time frame and when that was recorded, so that you'll have that to reference back to. If you are seeing a therapist, and I hope you are, if you haven't seen the video yet that Greg does on the importance of therapy and recovery, I encourage you, after maybe watching this one, to go to that bonus video and watch that. But with a therapist, this is a great opportunity in your journaling to begin to flesh out some of the things your therapist is talking with you about. Maybe to put anything you're doing with a trauma egg. Keep it all in one place. That way, you've got one place to go back, and you've kind of got a record now your own journey is recorded for you historically along a timeline, and what a valuable resource that's going to be as you're 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road in recovery, because this is a lifestyle. This is the rest of your life, and you'll have such a resource to be able to go back to and see firsthand the great and wonderful works that God is currently doing in your life. Write it down, get in the habit. If you want to know some specifics, maybe I'll do another video about how to do that. But for now, just know it's your journal. So it's whatever you're thinking. It's a stream of conscious, unfiltered, raw. Get those emotions and feelings down on paper. Don't try to edit as you put it down, okay? Because sometimes just getting it out there in its rawness is what you really need to see, so that now it's out, and now you can look at it from a different perspective to really begin to prayerfully get in touch with, God, what is going on? What am I feeling? Why did that hurt me so much? Or why did I feel certain things? Or why does that continue to be a trigger for me? And what that'll be able to be for you is part of the tools, one of the tools that God begins to use to help you connect the dots in your own story and how you're wired and how maybe some of your trauma or history is affecting your addiction and your acting out. So again, just a quick word on journaling and the importance of it, and hopefully soon you can have your own stack of your own journals like this as well. Such a valuable resource and so vital to the recovery process. Thanks, guys.